The night the river burned. On the morning of June 22, 1969, the people of Cleveland woke to what seemed like an ordinary summer Sunday. Church bells rang in quiet neighborhoods. Factory whistles sounded in the distance. Along the crooked bends of the Cuyahoga River, the air already carried the thick scent of oil and steel. For decades, the river had been the backbone of the city. It twisted through Cleveland like a working man's spine, bent, strained, but unbroken. Ships loaded with iron ore moved along its surface. Steel mills roared day and night. Refineries shimmered with heat. The river powered industry, and industry powered America. But beneath its surface, the Cuyahoga carried more than water. It carried waste. By the mid-20th century, factories lining the riverbanks had turned it into a dumping ground. Oil slicks floated like dark mirrors. Chemical runoff seeped from pipes hidden along the shore. Metal scraps, sludge, and debris drifted in slow circles where the current stalled. The water sometimes appeared rainbow-colored under the sun, not from beauty, but from contamination. Clevelanders had grown used to it. They joked that the river was so polluted it could not support life. Some said you would not drown in it, you would decay. It was a bitter humor, born from resignation. And sometimes the river burned. The first major fire had been recorded in the 1800s. Others followed through the early 1900s. The worst came in 1952, when flames caused more than $1 million in damage. Yet each time, after the smoke cleared, the city returned to work. The river was dirty, yes, but it was profitable. And in post-war America, prosperity overshadowed pollution. That Sunday in 1969, a train rolled across a trestle bridge above the river. As it passed over a stretch thick with oil-soaked debris, sparks likely fell from its wheels. They dropped onto a surface primed for ignition. Within seconds, the water caught fire. Flames leapt into the air, climbing nearly 5 stories high. Thick black smoke curled toward the sky. Workers nearby shouted warnings. Fire crews rushed in, hoses blasting foam and water onto a blaze fed not by wood or coal, but by chemicals floating atop a river. The fire lasted only about 30 minutes. Damage estimates hovered around $50,000. Compared to past infernos, it was small, manageable, another ugly incident in a long line of embarrassments. Locally, it barely made headlines. But America in 1969 was not the same America it had been in 1952. Across the country, citizens were questioning authority. The Vietnam War filled television screens with images of destruction. Civil rights protests demanded justice and accountability. A younger generation was challenging old assumptions about power, responsibility, and the future. At the same time, the environment itself was demanding attention. Smog choked Los Angeles, turning skies gray and stinging lungs. Earlier that year, an oil spill off the coast of Santa Barbara blackened beaches and killed wildlife. Americans were beginning to see that progress carried hidden costs. When national publications reported that a river in the United States had caught fire, the story resonated far beyond Ohio. A feature in Time magazine described the Cuyahoga in grim detail, calling it a river where a person does not drown but decay. Readers across the country were stunned. How could the richest nation on earth allow its waterways to ignite? The image of a burning river became a symbol, simple, powerful, impossible to ignore. It represented decades of unchecked industrial dumping and regulatory neglect. It exposed the gap between American pride and environmental reality. Outrage grew. In April 1960, millions of Americans gathered for the first Earth Day, organized by Senator Gaylord Nelson. Students marched, families attended rallies, communities held teach-ins about air and water pollution. Environmental protection was no longer a fringe concern. It had entered the mainstream. Later that year, President Richard Nixon created the United States Environmental Protection Agency, giving the federal government new authority to regulate pollution. 2 years later, Congress passed the Clean Water Act, setting national standards for water quality and restricting what industries could discharge into rivers and lakes. Lawmakers cited the Cuyahoga fire during debates. It had become evidence, visible proof that voluntary cleanups were not enough. The country needed enforceable laws. Back in Cleveland, change came slowly. Cleaning decades of contamination required massive effort and funding. Wastewater treatment plants were modernized. Industrial discharge was regulated. Community groups pushed for accountability. The river did not transform overnight, but over time it began to heal. Fish returned to stretches once declared biologically dead. Birds nested along rehabilitated banks. Parks replaced abandoned industrial lots. Kayakers paddled across waters that once carried flames. The Cuyahoga River became one of America's great environmental comeback stories, yet its history remains a warning. The fire of June 22, 1969, lasted less than 1 hour. The deeper blaze, the one fueled by neglect and complacency, had burned for decades. What changed was not the chemistry of the water alone, but the conscience of a nation. The people who fought that fire could not have known they were standing at a turning point in American history. They saw smoke and flames. They did not see the movement that would follow. But from that smoke rose a new awareness that economic strength and environmental stewardship could not be separated forever, that rivers are more than industrial tools, that progress without responsibility carries a cost. Today, as sunlight reflects off the calmer waters of the Cuyahoga, it is hard to imagine flames reaching toward the sky. Children play along its banks. Boats glide quietly past revitalized neighborhoods. The air smells cleaner. The river that once symbolized pollution now stands as proof of recovery. It burned many times, but on that June morning in 1969, when the river caught fire once more, the United States finally decided it would not burn again.